Alrighty. Hey gang. Welcome back, you guys. Happy Wednesday. How are ya? Nice to see you guys. Well, here we are, another episode of Stove Chat. Stove Chat 29. How about that? I'm Matt, as always, and nice to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Hey, Pete. Tall Shadow, always learning. Doug, gang's all here. Right on, you guys. Thanks for being here. Hello, Mart Hale. Nice to see you. Welcome, everybody. How are you guys? Hope you guys are having a great Wednesday, great week. I'm doing great, personally. Thank you. Having a nice week here. We're getting cold, you guys. It's getting to be winter season, so hope you guys are enjoying the fall. I definitely am. It's been nice and crisp and pretty clear here. We got leaves changing, and I've been riding my bike. I crashed a little bit, but all good, doing great, and hope you guys are too. So as you guys know, we're here every week doing Stove Chat. We're talking about rocket stoves, rocket mass heaters, masonry cook stoves, all kinds of cool stuff. As you guys know, you can check out my site, walkerstoves.com, where there's full plans and plan sets available to help you build your dream stove, and that's what we're here for, to talk about stoves, talk about builds, help you guys answer any questions you might have, or just sort out any troubles you're having with a build and moving forward. So there you go. Hey Chris, welcome. Thanks for being here. And Belgian Gulch, glad to see you, my friend. Glad you could make it today. So let's see. I promised you guys that today we were going to dive in to some photos of some builds. Oh, look at that. We were doing so good on the sun, and it's just peeking back. It's only going to be there for a minute. I'm not going to let it bother me this time. Thanks for your patience last week, by the way, with my disaster. Hey, Mark. Good to see you. Glad you're here. I promised you guys we were going to look at photos. We're definitely going to do that. I got a great slideshow queued up for us. Some really nice, really neat builds that we can go over, and I'm really looking forward to that. I did get a great question. I think some of you have been dealing with this question this week as well, and I thought maybe it'd be a good example for us to go over, an important thing for all of us to remember when building. So we've got that to go over, and maybe there's some questions from you guys. So I know some of you are starting your builds. I got some great emails from some folks who are starting to get their hands dirty. We've been doing some planning for a while, so I don't know if I see it here yet, but looking forward to seeing these things come to fruition, and just let me know if I can help if you're here and need any questions answered. So, sun's gonna play havoc with the camera. Sorry, guys. Let's talk real quick about an issue that's going on out there in the world. It's not an issue at all, actually. The issue is just with getting the word out to the folks building them. So you guys have seen this one. I got an email yesterday from a friend who's helping somebody with their first build. And this first build is currently all in metal, right? It's got the metal barrel, and they're using half barrels, so they've got exposed half barrels. And they're trying to burn it, and they're panicking about whether it's working or not. And I just wanted to go over that issue one more time for folks who are new, who don't know that you can only extract so much heat from a rocket mass heater before it just won't work. And if you have a large system that is all metal radiating surfaces, you're going to take all the heat out of the exhaust, and you're going to have no difference in temperature, delta T, left in your final chimney exhaust to power your draft. And so you're going to have a plug chimney, and the stove's going to exhaust through every little crack and gap and out through the front door and everywhere else. So just a reminder, and if you're new and you haven't experienced it, just a warning. If you're building your rocket mass heater, whether you're using flue pipe, half barrels, even a bell if you have a thin top and you're planning on putting masonry on later, but maybe you've got steel there now as a cap, anytime you have far more radiator surface area than you're going to have in your final build, you need to remember that you are extracting way more heat. Not only that, but masonry heaters, by the nature of being masonry heaters, they store heat in the body of the stove, and in that way, they power their own draft. They don't do that until they're warm. And so for most builds, I like to incorporate a bypass so you can power the draft in the chimney without getting the mass warm. But if you don't have a bypass, you have to get the mass warm before you're going to have consistent, adequate draft. And so just a reminder that if you've got a bunch of bare metal out there and you're trying to burn your stove, don't panic. You just need to keep going, and you need to get it hot and dry. And if you don't have a bypass, you're going to have a lot of smoke in the house during this phase. It's why all of my plans incorporate bypasses, but it certainly isn't to say that you can't have a successful build without a bypass. You can. There's hundreds of them, if not thousands, out there. You just need to be aware that when it's cold and the stove is cold, you need to warm up, prime the stove and get it warm. And then usually for most of us with a masonry heater, that's only going to be once a year, and then the thing's warm. So for a lot of us, that's acceptable. So if a bypass is a real difficulty to install, a lot of times it's easier just to install a priming port somewhere under your chimney where you can light some newspaper or something, prime the chimney, get the draft going, get the stove warmed up in the early part of the season, and then once it's warm, it should stay warm, and you shouldn't have that issue ever again. So there's that. Just wanted to throw that out there. Maybe some of you who need to hear that are watching right now. So if you are, good luck and keep moving forward, and just know that you need some chimney temps there. So Pete asks, how would a Walker 6-inch boiler compare to an 8-inch with big oil drum if being used as an outside swimming pool heater? Same output temps, I assume, but longer burns and longer steady output temps. Yeah, Pete, that's exactly it. So, when we look at the outputs of both the 6-inch or the 8-inch, any rocket mass heater core, whether it's a batch or a J, we're typically looking at roughly double the size of the cross-sectional area of the whole stove. And so it's actually a little more, I think, when we break it down into the firebox of the batch boxes. And so if you think about the output power of a stove, it's a function of how much wood it holds and how much time it burns, right? And so both the 6-inch and the 8-inch, we like to use, sort of a nominal burn time of, and this is, it gets a little weird with the 8-inch, with this, because they don't consume at exactly the same rate in terms of, or not same rate, but they don't use the same time period to consume their loads of fuel. The 8-inch does take a little bit longer, but it doesn't take twice as long, I don't think. And so on average, let's say you can reload a 6-inch every hour, or the 8-inch is going to be maybe every hour and a half, something like that. If you're really trying to get the max heat out, you might even be able to go every hour if you were really pushing. So what I'm trying to say is, you put 12 pounds or 6 kilograms ish of wood into a 6-inch batch box, you put double that, 12 kilograms, something like 25 pounds of fuel, 30 pounds in an 8-inch batch box. They both burn for roughly an hour. So what was the difference in the way they burned? And I think you pretty much nailed it. Is basically the 6-inch is only going to hit peak temperatures for a very short time out of that hour. And it's going to be mostly ramping up to temp, unless it's a second load, and then burning at peak temp, and then kind of slowly tapering off. But the peak of that burn is probably 15 minutes or so, typically looking at my testo charts, and Peter's as well. 15 to 20 minutes, let's say, for a standard batch box doing a normal burn with everything wide open. An 8-inch is probably going to have a sweet spot of something like 45 minutes. So you're going to have a much longer peak sustained output. And what I mean by that then is you pretty much hit the nail on the head. It's hard to put a temperature on it, but let's just say like in my normal J tube with a barrel, that barrel would be 700 degrees-ish at a good peak burn. Well, if that was an 8-inch or a 6-inch core beneath it, it didn't change that 700 degrees by much. It's not like all of a sudden I'm hitting 1200. 780, 680, roughly in the same range of temperature. But the main difference is, like we just talked about, 15 minutes of that peak output from the 6-inch, and probably 45 or an hour, quite a significantly more with the 8-inch. So yes, so when looking at outdoor swimming pool heater, your goal is going to be to try and keep your sustained output at its peak. For a sustained, I didn't say that right, but you know what I'm saying, peak output for over a long sustained period, and you're going to be far more effective doing that with an 8-inch. So I've been working with quite a few customers recently who are working on Walker boiler builds for their large greenhouses, and there's a couple guys in the Rocky Mountains, actually 3, I think, customers who are doing similar stuff. And that's kind of, that's been one of the main factors that we talk about, is how are we going to get the most output out of these relatively small heaters, that we're trying to task with these big heating tasks. And so I think that that the 8-inch size jump makes an enormous difference. I don't know that there's much to be gained from going much bigger than that, unless you really want to tackle a giant project, because the economies of scale starts to get into. You just start to need sort of exotic materials and exotic sizes as you get much bigger than that. So anyways, I hope that answers your question. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually, so it was a fitting question, and if there's more, I'd love to go deeper into that. Always Learning asks, should bypass to cold vertical chimney in the beginning to create strong draft, right? I'm not exactly sure the question, Always Learning, but yes, you have the right concept. The bypass should go right into that cold chimney, right into the vertical if you can, and that's going to provide that power that we're looking for to get this thing pulling. And then we can start to sort of incrementally close down the bypass and force some of our hot gases to go through the rest of the stove, through those cold channels. We'll be essentially pulling them through with the hot gas we're injecting into the chimney. But by pulling them through there, by using a combination of bypass and regular flue path, we can accelerate the rate at which this body of the masonry stove warms up, and eventually we'll be able to close that bypass. So it's really useful to manage your draft in all conditions, the bypass. So Mart says, and get the pull of the chimney started. Exactly, Mart. Yep, always bypass the mass to jumpstart the fire and get the pull of the chimney started. That's exactly right, Mart. Now, I just want to say that we are talking about masonry stoves, so once the body of the stove is warm, if you're on a regular burn cycle, you probably won't use your bypass. So how useful that bypass is to you really depends on a number of things. How you use the stove, your climate, your lifestyle, right? Like if you're gone for 2 days and back for a day, and gone for 2 days and back a day, you definitely want to bypass. If you're home all the time, you might not need it. You might just pick your day to start up early in the spring when it's really cold outside and you've got some warm air inside from some sun or something, and maybe the sun just went down and you got a cold snap. You'll get some good natural difference in temperature, some natural delta T. That'll help you with those difficult startups when the body of the stove is cold. You can get over the hump, get the body of the stove warm, and then you don't really need a bypass. But yes, I believe in bypasses. I believe that they're going to help you. In the spring, you're burning, like I said, you need a fire every third day or whatever because it's just a cold morning. You really want to bypass for that type of burn cycle. So there you go. So hey, Luke. There's Luke. So Luke says, thanks Belgian Gulch for your comments on permies. All words of encouragement on permies are appreciated. Builder is nervous. Okay, so I didn't want to say any names, but that's Luke asking about the metal with someone he's helping with a build. And so yeah, you guys are on the right track, Luke. Just I don't want to dismiss it, but he's just gonna have to push forward and tune it when he gets there. He's definitely overthinking it and definitely agonizing over some minute details that are definitely not worth worrying about at this point until you see how it works. It may not work. You might need to tear it down. It's hard to say, but you got to get to the end before you know. You can do all the best practices. It looks like you guys are doing fine. It is what it is. Frankly, if someone really is that concerned, I'm usually going to recommend they just buy a box stove. And that isn't meant to be a jerk. That's meant to just say that you might not be getting any the advantages out of this that you are imagining if you are, if it's really so difficult to get there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like if you need to just put it in and for it to work and have peace of mind, sometimes it's better, you know, to just go with a tried and true off the shelf deal. So just saying something, you know, I've had experiences with folks like that, and often, you know, my goal is to help them have the best heating season they can to stay warm, and you guys have seen it here on Stove Chat. Sometimes the rocket mass heaters aren't the right fit, and often, you know, I think when people are really overthinking the details and agonizing over, you know, it has to work, and, you know, it might not be time for an experimental type project. So that's all. Just wanted to say, you know, there's a bit of mental game there too, because rocket mass heaters are a DIY project for someone who, you know, kind of wants one. And so if you don't want one, they can be frustrating. But I think you guys are on the right track. So keep pushing forward. You know what the issue is. It's just delta T. It's that simple. So okay, let's move on, you guys. We got some great stuff to go over here. So I want to start. Yeah, let's. Hey, Permaculture Playground, nice to see you. Oh, and Luke says, I think a bypass will solve it. A bypass will absolutely solve his concerns, Luke. 100%, no question about it. Yeah, that's the best, easiest path forward, probably. So there you go. Okay, so on to let's get on to some build photos, you guys. We got some really cool stuff to look at, and there's cool stuff. Let's see. I'm getting pulled off by the chat here. So Belgian Gulch says sliding tube in the barrel, raised to start. That's a certain style of bypass that could work for sure. So let's see. I'm going to switch over to the other, if I can find the right, there we go. All right. So here we are, guys. This is, you know what I'd like to do? Oh no, it should be here. Sorry, hold on, guys. Let me, I'm going to try and get the camera going here. I don't seem to be able to do it. Sorry, just playing with my settings here, friends. I'm going to go back to the main cam. I have to copy my video capture device here. And then I can put it into this one. There we go. Oh, I think I'm screwing everything up, fellas. Bear with me here. There, that's what I was hoping to do. Okay, so thanks for bearing with me on that one. So this is, we're just going to take I've got a few quick picks of some builds, and I got some builds we'll spend some more time on. So this one is just a quick pick of a little tiny stove build, and I just wanted to show one example of a water heat exchanger that one of my customers has built into their tiny cook stove. I thought this was a nice installation. I would say this is a little pinched on the sides here, being only about an inch in terms of restrictions, but there's a lot of room back here for gases to flow, so it's not 100% pinched. And it's just a nice, neat installation, and this does a good job of showing you one way to interface the heat exchanger with external plumbing is they've just threaded this stainless pipe that they've had bent and a die put on it to cut threads, and then they're just passing that through gaps in the brickwork and using mortar to seal that up. So that's a neat way to do that. I really like that. I thought it was really clean. And so I just wanted to show you that. And just so we can see how that panned out, here is the rest of this build. You can see their core going in and their door. And sorry, my photos are jumping all over. I'm struggling here. Okay, here we go. Why is it doing that? Well, anyways, doesn't matter. So there's the beautiful benchtop they made. That is just one of my favorite benchtops I've ever seen on one of these stoves. I just think it's gorgeous. They used pieces of, I believe, stained glass to make the design, the salmon there and the undersea scene. So I think that's just one of the coolest things. I love this heater, and as you can see, it just came out gorgeous. The soapstone on the top there for that final finish, and what a lovely stove, isn't it? This is just gorgeous. So there's the first build. So I wanted to just kind of show you guys a little bit of what's possible with some finer finishes and things like that. So here's a stove with built-in water heating and a small bench in a tiny cook stove. So very, very cool. There's a little shot of the soapstone top. Love this. And so now we are on to Belgian Gulch. And Belgian Gulch, thank you so much for sending all these photos. This is so great. I've really enjoyed following you along on your build. So most of these we've seen before, you guys. So I'm just going to kind of speed through the first part here. But we've got a few at the end that I wanted to get to. And some of these are going to be relevant to some other builds we're doing right now. So here's the inside of Belgian Gulch's batch box. And here it is, starting to come together. That was a work of art, wasn't it, Mart? Yeah, it was a gorgeous stove. One of the nicer ones that I've seen. I've seen some nice ones. I've got some more photos, and we won't get into all of them today. But that one was beautiful. Definitely a work of art. And here we've got Belgian Gulch's wonderful work of function, which I really appreciate as well. So he's got just a really nice heavy-duty build here. A lot of mass in this thing. I'm just kind of skipping along, you guys, because we've already looked at these. But here's the new ones that I wanted to show you. I think we started to look at these when they came through. But what he's doing here, which I think is really cool, is he's built himself a barrel landing. I'm just going to skip through. There's your wonderful door, Belgian Gulch. So you can see here, he's built this wonderful barrel landing. And then he has landed his barrel on there, as you can see. But not to be... He's not done yet. Because as you can see, once we get a little farther here, let me get to the next fix. Here's his exits. I'm just trying to get to the newer photos. I think we looked at a lot of these. But here we go. He's starting to build up around the barrel. And I'm assuming this is around the barrel, Belgian Gulch. And the barrel is inside of this. But I thought that was a really cool way to do that. And I just wanted to add that I think that what you're doing here, Belgian Gulch, is that I think you are trying to reduce a little bit of the quick radiating heat area of this radiator and just change to a lot more slow radiating brick here. And I think it's a great construction style. The one thing I'd say, you have what looks like a lid on top up here. So you can open the top of this and get in here and service your riser. That is an awesome way to go. That's probably the very best way to build this. However, I just wanted to point out that for anyone wanting to do a build like this, where they have much more masonry than they have radiator, then another way to do this would be just to build this entire brick part as the barrel landing, and then cut your barrel right here and just land the barrel on the bricks there. And in that way, you just have like a removable top barrel, because for you to get this barrel off here, you'd have to remove all these bricks. Now, you probably won't need to, because like I said, you have a barrel lid. But for those of us who don't have a barrel lid, there's another way to do this, which would be to just cut the radiator down. And that's something I've brought up a few times, but I don't know if I've ever made that point specifically, that one of the beauties of those barrels is that they're flexible in terms of how you can scale that radiator size. So remember, anyone building a rocket mass heater, you don't need to keep the full size barrel. You can use any amount of it that you see fit. And like Belgian Gulch has done here, you can actually work your way towards your proper tune. You can start with a really big barrel, and then you can slowly cut it down and build up your barrel landing and adjust to get yourself a different ratio of mass to radiator. So that is, I think, a really, really great way of tuning your stove once it's been built. And Belgian Gulch, I want to thank you again for your photos. This is a really cool build in your studio here. And I can't wait to hear how it's working for you, by the way. Love the doors. Very, very cool. So jump back to the chat. Hey, Clint, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. So Clint has a question. I have a question about bypass. I have a floor to ceiling vertical bell. The flue is entirely in the bell. Could I put a damper tee in the flue at the top of the bell with an operating rod? Could I put a damper tee? I'm not following your question, Clint. The flue is entirely in the bell. The flue, meaning the chimney. You have the chimney in the bell going outside. And could you put a damper, a T? Yeah, I don't understand, Clint. I'm not following you. You'll have to send me an email with some pictures or something, or a drawing, I think, unless you want to describe it better. So Mart says, I'd like to see the temps on top of that barrel. Yeah, I would too, Mart. You know, one thing I'm curious about is as the radiator gets smaller, do you increase the temperature on top of the barrel, or does it still just blast, the heat right off the metal on top? I'm inclined to think it's probably fine. Keep in mind my tiny stove just has that piece of glass, single piece of glass. It doesn't have a whole bunch of sides to radiate. And that initial heat, when it hits those thin radiators, whether it's the glass or the metal, it gets into the space and it sheds the heat out of the exhaust gases quite rapidly. So I don't know. I wouldn't be too concerned. I think it's probably going to be fine. Keep in mind that many of my designs have that entirely encased in masonry with an insulated top. And I know the temperatures inside those don't get ridiculously hot either. He does have a huge burn box. Mart, you're right. So Belgian Gulch is going to go check for us. Quick, Belgian Gulch, we're concerned. No, I'm not concerned, to be honest with you guys. It will get hot, though. It definitely will get hot. I bet. I don't know. Yeah, let's find out. Let's see what he can reach up there. Yeah, Permaculture Playground's got an answer for you there, Clint. He says, I think you can, Clint, but it'll extract some of your hottest air as well. Then oh, is that what you meant by the T? You put the flue in the bell, and the T just so you're picking to pick up the exhaust from the bell? Like the flue goes through the bell, and then you're going to have a T in there that you can adjust whether it's pulling from the bell or from the flue. I'm still not following you entirely, but Permaculture Playground has the right idea, and he's right that if you're pulling from the top of the bell, that's going to be a problem because they don't really ever close. And so they're not terrible, and you will eventually prioritize, I think, to the path of least resistance. But yeah, he's got a good point. And so I don't know, I'd like to see your sketch of it. I think there's probably some other ways to adjust it to mitigate some of the downsides to that. But I think I know you've got a great handle, Clint, on the concepts here. You've really shown me that you've been putting a lot of thought into it. So, I think you're probably on the right track, but it might just need a little bit of tuning. But I can't get a clear picture, so I don't want to tell you yes or no without understanding exactly what you're up to there. The T part is really throwing me off. I think I know what you mean, but I can't picture where you are and if it's coming from somewhere else. So anyways, let's move on with the builds here. So Belgian Gulch, very, very cool. We're going to wait for him to run back and tell us that he's doing great. Oh, there's a great photo. So I think these next photos are going to skip around out of order a little bit. Whoa. Sorry, dealing with some window management here. So just bear with me, but this is there's a lot of photos in this in this next run. And this is a tiny stove build in Japan, and it's one of my favorites. And so these are going to skip around, so I'll just kind of make comments. I'm just going to go through them pretty quick and make comments when I can. But some really neat work in this one. I really appreciate that. You can see here a really nice rabbet where the stove top, the glass top, is going to go. Same thing there with the chimney interface. These guys doing really careful work laying their bricks. Again, you can see where the glass stovetop goes. A nice rabbet to lay the stovetop in there. So Belgian Gulch says $4.90 on top, but things are still drying. So thanks for that info, Belgian Gulch. I don't think you're going to have anything to worry about. I bet you'll see 700. I've gotten my barrel to, I think, just about 900 degrees before. The whole thing glowing cherry orange, and it was fine. So I don't expect you'll have any issues, but it will get hot. So these are, like I said, these pictures are out of order, so you'll just have to bear with me, but here's one of this same build kind of done, showing that really nice expansion joint, where they let this glass top into these bricks. They've made a big rabbet around the edge and then used just clay sand mortar to form that expansion joint. So really nice, clean build there. So here they all are enjoying the stove. And like I said, these skip around, but there's some great photos here. So I'm just going to go through them for us because they're really, really useful. So very, very careful work. Here's the stove. As you can see, there's clay all over it. It hasn't been washed down yet, so it's just in its early firings. They got sort of a temporary door on there, I think. And but what a neat stove, right? What beautiful work. This is a really cool shot. This is a picture of the way they did their bypass. And so they got a piece of ceramic fiberboard in this steel channel. And I think that is a really neat way to go. By capturing it in this channel, they're minimizing wear, rubbing it against masonry. It also helps with the seal, and I thought this was just a really clean way of incorporating the bypass. So here they are working away on the stove, a nice simple insulated plug door there, using some of my techniques. It's nice to see that, and just beautiful work. This is a really cool shot, you guys. This is a very simple way to construct a secondary air pre-port pipe. So if you'll notice, they just used a piece of angled steel here, and it's just probably drilled and tapped into the two sections. And that's all you need. It doesn't need to be, incredibly structurally sound. You just need to hold those pieces in place. And I think this is a great, simple way to go. They didn't have to weld, and they're up and running. So I thought that was a really neat idea. So again, looking down in the top, I had a great question this week from Tall Shadow. Tall Shadow, this is a great illustration of your question if you're watching. Tall Shadow wrote me and asked me about the height of these pieces within the riserless core. And he said, in your plans, these pieces, and that includes these, he says you don't dictate the width of these pieces or what turns out to be the height of them here. And he says, and I'm wondering, is that a mistake? Why is that? And the answer was that because this height of these pieces in your riserless core, the dividers in the top, as it were, and the sides, is dictated by your finished stove height. And your finished stove height is going to vary depending on your brick size and your mortar gaps. And so you don't want to cut these or plan on them until you have finished your stove and you've reached your finished height, and then you can place these appropriately so they interface with your glass or metal top. So hope that makes sense, Tall Shadow, and these are great pictures to illustrate that. So there they are watching it burn. Really clean job on the chimney. You can see they topped that piece of ceramic fiberboard that formed the initial seal, and they just topped it with clay sand mortar. It sounds, when I describe this to people, it sounds like a really sort of, half-baked way to finish it. But you can see that when it's all said and done, it actually comes out really nicely. So we can do it pretty easily, these interfaces, without real expensive fittings and stuff. So one of my favorite aspects of these stoves. So as you can see, really nice work here. A rabbet here, letting this ceramic fiberboard into the brick to catch the chimney. Now it's not holding the weight of the chimney. The chimney's suspended from the ceiling, but it is just forming the seal, and then you can see there's a little bit of elevation here, so they can fill it in with clay sand mortar on top. So there you can see it even more clearly. There you go. And there's their bypass. Use the same technique I did. Looks like just a coat hanger wire with a little piece of wood on it, and it works fine. It doesn't need to be anything really fancy. So, what a beautiful stove, huh? And I love this simple fire brick top in contrast to the red brick body. I think it looks great. The fire brick have a nice crisp edges to them. I think it's gorgeous. So I thought that was a really neat way to finish that stove. So here it is, kind of getting closer to done. There's the bypass, and that's the end of that stove. So I thought that was a great build. And let's just jump over here. I'll jump back to the main cam real quick, and we'll get back into the chat for a moment. So Belgian Gulch, thanks for getting your temps on there. He said $490 on top, and he's had it 1100 degrees with his 8-inch cast perlite core. Interesting. That's hot. So I think that's probably about as hot as I've ever seen one. That's hot for sure. So, and it's still fine, right? So you're okay. You're not gonna have any problems. So Clint says I would be able to open the flue at the top of the bell, and gases would enter the bell and exit at the top. Yeah, again, Clint, I think we'll probably want to see your drawings. You really don't want to exit at the top of the bell, typically, unless I'm misunderstanding you. If you exit the top of the bell, you're going to just be exhausting all of your warm air out. So we typically want to exhaust at the bottom of the bell. So yeah, again, I think we're just crossing our communication here. I'm sure you're on the right track, but why don't we just do that one via email, and we'll get there. So, yeah, Tall Shadow, very clear with how the top gets finished. Yes, hopefully that was helpful, Tall Shadow. That really shows you, what I was trying to say, is basically your finished elevation of the stove. Everyone's is going to be different, just by a little bit, but there's going to be variance there. So you just want to wait until you get there. So the Law Doc asks, what temps can these glass stove tops tolerate? Great question, Law Doc. I have yet to see one break from heat. I have reports of people breaking them via having them pinched tightly, and they get impinged upon by the bricks moving either from the side or in one instance I had a fella who I never really heard what the end result was, but our suspicion was that he had the top clamped down tight and his door was growing. The metal, the steel was, would grow with the heat, and it was breaking his top. So as long as you use good expansion joints, the glass and the glass doesn't get put under compression or tension, then temperature-wise, it seems to be able to handle anything that we can throw at it with a rocket mass heater. So we've put this glass on top of an 8-inch batch box, firebox at Paul Wheaton's place. Peter and I did that, and that top was unbelievably hot. We put glass right over the top of the risers before on both 6 and 8-inch J's and on batches. And my tiny stove, again, burns about as hot as a 6-inch batch. So I will regularly see temperatures on those ceramic glass tops. My thermometer peaks at like 990, so when I say I regularly see temps of 1,000 degrees, that's all I can measure. They're probably above that. The glass or the ceramic glass itself, certain brand names like Robax have a rating of continuous 1350. I've seen for most of them. That's Fahrenheit, and that's continuous. Now, I think we get hotter than that sometimes, but I also think that glass, if it's not, if it's exposed to your space on one side, then no matter how hot the inside gets, well, not no matter how hot, but our rocket stoves can only get so hot, it can give off a ton of heat into the space. So even though you're reading 1,000 degrees off the glass, this side of it isn't 1,000 degrees anymore. It's shedding that heat as quickly as it can. So my experience is that temperature in a wood-burning device is not a concern with ceramic glass. Like I said, compression and tension is a concern, but not peak temps. I don't think we can exceed their temps in an external configuration. Now, I have had people ask me if you can install the glass and use it as like a firebox liner. And I don't have a good answer to that, because I tend to believe that inside an insulated compartment in the wood stove that we probably can exceed the temperatures that the glass can handle. So that was sort of a non-answer, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a guideline there. Basically, I would say don't worry about it in any place you might think to normally put it in a rocket mass heater build. So there you go. Okay, Permaculture Playground says that's just the bypass to start. Then it gets closed and draws from the bottom of the bell. Right. Speaking about Clint's plan. Yeah, that would totally work, Clint. If it's a bypass for a startup bypass, absolutely. You can put that in the top of the bell. I got you now. Can I put a T in the flue? The flue is in the bell. Can you put a T in the bell and put a butterfly in the T to create your bypass? Yes. Yes, you can do that. I've got you now. Following you. Yeah, you can do that. I know kind of what you're building, and I'm just going to say that, well, it sounds like maybe you have 2 chimneys going, and I'm not sure what's going on there, but just keep in mind that you got to get it over to that bell, and that probably wouldn't be an issue. But you are in an area where you are going to have low temperature differentials. So if I were you, I would just do your best to install the most direct bypass you can. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, you might be having 2 chimneys, and then you can you can use one for the hot startup. So there you go. So Tall Shadow says. Yeah, the one failure of the ceramic glass tops is it's possible, I've found, to drop surfboards or snowboards on them and break them. Tall Shadow. Yeah. So as you guys can see right up there, I got that snowboard hanging, and the first time I hung it up there, I didn't hang it so good, and I slammed my front door one day and turned around, and that snowboard was falling through my stove top. So if you can try not to drop snowboards on your stove glass top, it'll hold up a lot better. And I don't know if you can see it, but right there, I don't know if you guys can even see my mouse, but right there on top of my stove is the pile of mud that's still sealing the crack from where my snowboard fell on it. So I still have the broken glass there, and I'm still burning it because I haven't gone junkyard cruising for a new glass top. So there's that. So, all right, guys. Well, we're at 45 minutes, and we got one more build I want to get through. So, can't see my mouse cursor. Okay, thanks for telling me, Mart. I wasn't sure. So let's dive into this one more build, and we've seen most of it before, but we just haven't seen the end of it. So this is Josh in Wales, and Josh, thanks so much for sending these along. This is this amazing build. I'm just so inspired by this, and I think it's so cool. And this is in a lovely little cottage, and as you can see, this is a staircase that Josh is replacing with a rocket mass heater. So I'm going to speed through the first half of these because we've seen, well, I won't go too fast because they're so interesting, but we've seen the first half of these already here on chat a few weeks back. So here are the stairs still, and he's getting ready to tear those out. And then, as you can see, they're gone, and they have no way to get upstairs. And there's a temporary ladder set up, but we now got a nice workspace here that we can work in. And just kind of moving forward with the demo, getting down to the bottom of the floor, pouring a new pad. Very cool. And as you can see, he's got some temporary stairs set up, and here we are. We're getting ready to start. So this is just so cool. So here we are laying out the pedestal of the bell, and there is a stand for the core inside. This is such a cool build. It really is. Yeah, Belgian Gulch, I love this. So we got a brand new pour on the floor. We got this lovely bottom of the bell going together. And it's all starting to take shape. And again, we've seen a lot of these, so I'm going to kind of speed through. But now he's got a poured slab here to hold the core. Really nice work, just really great attention to detail. And what you see here, this big space on the left of the image, we talked about this the other day, but it's going to be he's going to brick over that, but it's a service entrance, and I think that's really, really smart. Is a place that you make it easy to extract some bricks and get yourself into the stove if you know that there's otherwise no other easy way to get in there. So really, really smart plan here. Just gonna brick this over with non-interlocked bricks and leave service access for later. So now the fire bricks are coming in to form this batch box. Oh, my mouse showed up. So weird how that I can't figure this thing out. I'm not the best computer guy sometimes, guys, but I appreciate the feedback. Hey Cletus, nice to see you. So yeah, so if my mouse showed up, then you can see this is the service entrance here, and this will be bricked over. And now we've got our core going in. You can see he's got an expansion joint going here, some ceramic wool laid between these bricks, and I think what we're going to see is, oh, I see, that was actually just being laid up around the core. Those were just laid there so they could then be pulled up to allow the core to be insulated and to have an expansion joint to keep it floating from the red bricks. So the slab down there, Cletus, I'm going to say is just regular concrete. You'll never get that much heat in a bell system like this, especially since it's going to be a tall bell. You'll never be able to push that much heat down this low. So that can just be regular concrete down there. So here's the build continuing. You can see these cleanouts kind of taking shape. And we got some insulated fire brick going into the core here. So this is a sidewinder batch box configuration. Very, very cool build. Very, very neat and tidy. Another cast refractory slab here for the top of the firebox in this case. Really neat work. Great attention to detail. Really looking at just wonderful aspects of a build here. I hope this is all helping you guys out. I find these so informative. So yeah, so you can see we got floating core, fire brick core, red brick body, insulation where those two meet, because the core is going to grow and move at different rates than that red brick, and the side loaded riser. So here's the body of the stove starting to come together. And as we said, there's the riser, insulated fire brick for the riser. Really neat work, just beautiful. Now he's got these steel brick pins. I can't remember what they're called. Brick retaining masonry things here, and these can go into the be laid into the masonry here, and they can be extended and basically lock in place this ceramic fiberboard insulation. So he can hold the insulation around his core in place by using these steel standoffs embedded in the mortar and the bricks. So Mark, the slab under the firebox should be refractory because it will get exceptionally hot. So that's a place where you wouldn't want to use regular concrete. Absolutely. So like we said, now this is going to be a staircase, right? So he's replacing his staircase with a rocket mass heater. So here we are looking down into the heater, and you can see the shape of the top of it forming the stairway. So how cool is that, right? There's the chimney interfacing. You can see there's a chimney down low, and then he's got a bypass up here with a T. So Clint, this is very much like what you were asking, I think. The only difference is his chimney is external to the flue, but the same idea. Okay? And that is how that interfaces there. And here he's got ceramic fiberboard covering the top of the bell. Now, one of his concerns was, how to put these masonry treads on this masonry stove and keep everything firm through all the thermal cycles. So we talked about it a lot, and what we came up with was to give it as much of a thermal break as we can with the ceramic fiberboard, and then build on top of that using his masonry stair construction, which we'll get to, I think, in just a minute here. And in that way, we're hoping, and I think it's going to work, that the treads will be able to essentially float as a whole unit above the body of the stove, and in that way, hopefully, last for a long, long time. So again, lots of cleanouts, lots of control. Now this is a double skinned heater. So on the inside we had that normal red clay brick for the lower, and then he switched to fire brick for the upper. Just good practice. And he's using these concrete blocks for the outer skin. Now we've talked about concrete being non-suitable for really hot areas, but for an outer skin here, it's just fine. It's going to give him a lot of mass, and he's using, it looks like a thin fiberglass as a batting in between those to provide that expansion joint. So really good construction techniques here. He's really using a lot of classic masonry heater techniques. This is definitely a higher end build than what we typically see in my single skin DIY builds. But I think it's really neat because he's using a lot of our same concepts. And this is Josh's second heater. He built a a brick J tube to my plans a few years ago and loved it. And so this is just his sort of progression as a builder. And I love to see it. You can tell it's an advanced build. You can tell it's gorgeous. And it's really nice to see. So Josh, really kudos to you, man. Good work. And I think this is really cool. So he's really painstakingly separated this outer skin from the inner skin. That's masonry heater technology that they've perfected over millennia, and so he's really working the details here, and you can see it's really gorgeous. So he actually has a completely separate floating inner and outer, and yet still the doorway is all interfacing in the right place, and it's sealed inside and out, and all of that. So there you go. So there's another picture of that. Really, really pretty finish. And as you can see, it's starting to kind of form just this single big monolith. We know what's going on in there, and it's a pretty complex shape. But on the outside, it starts to form just this real organic looking structure. I think it's so neat the way that works. So Luke says, how did he float them apart? So the way he's floating them, Luke, is that they're actually just two separate pieces. So he had that inner skin that was brick and fire brick, and then the outer skin here that's cinder block or concrete block with the bricks around the doorway threshold there. And then you can see these bricks are just on edge. So they just don't interlock with the inner skin, but they touch. And where they touch, I'm assuming he's got a little bit of super wool or ceramic fiber or something there to form that expansion joint. And then you could mortar it, and the mortar's probably going to crack out of there over time. But nonetheless, you just basically, the airspace between those two skins is essentially, it's not sealed, but it's pretty well plugged with the batting that he put in between there. So you're really just, these are not interfaced, the outer skin and the inner skin, where the door comes together. They just mate like that. So they're just kind of, and that's why I say floating apart. They're not, there's nowhere where those skins interlock brick to brick. So hopefully that makes sense and answers your question. So there's his secondary air tube, pre-port tube. Remember, it's a sidewinder, so it's shooting off to the left there. Very cool. And here we go. So he's got a basic render on the outside that he's put some texture in. And this is just in preparation for what I'm assuming is going to be a lime plaster render for the final finish. And Luke says, oh, but for the rest of the build, are they touching? No, Luke, they're not touching anywhere. The skins are always floating. Always a small gap between the brick and concrete. Yes, you could see it back there in one of those pictures. He had some fiberglass. You can just barely see it right here, but he's got sheets of it looks like fiberglass mat to act as a batting between the two. It really just acts as its expansion joint. That way you can kind of snuggle them together against that fiberglass, not tightly, just and they'll be floating. And will the batting stop or deter the heat transfer? You know, it's a great question. Always learning. It's something I'm not 100% sure on, because if you didn't have that, you'd have an airspace. So I've seen a lot of classic masonry heater builds, and they always have that little bit of expansion joint there. Sometimes they just use like cardboard in the build, and then they let it burn out to form that expansion joint. So you know, I don't know the answer to that. I think that what it comes down to, always learning, is that the expansion joint serves the purpose of insulating the outside from the thermal movement of the inner skin, and in that way you can, you know, do nicer finishes and get more permanent finishes, apparently. But whether that comes at the cost of a little bit slower heat transfer, it might. You know, it might. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And that's why we talked earlier about single and double skins and heat transfer and, you know, all those things. So, you know, most of my builds are single skin because I like that quick heat transfer and high outer skin temps. But yeah, will it slow the deter the heat transfer? I think it does slow it. I think it still comes into the room. And I think in most instances it's sort of, that's a designed feature. They want it to come out slowly, as it were. And yeah, Luke says, I've heard some people just use a sacrificial piece of cardboard. Exactly, Luke. I've heard that many times. And I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's great. I haven't personally found a reason for me in my builds to go to those double skins. But yeah, we've talked about the ins and outs of that. So let me just speed ahead. You can see he's starting to render this thing. It's just got vertical lines in it. He's making the texture so he can get some adhesion to his final layers. But here's where I was trying to get to is, it's not finished. You know, he's got the whole house to do. They're going to plaster the whole place. So it's waiting, but you know, other than just the final render on the outside, the final detail, that's pretty much done. And as you can see, it's gorgeous, isn't it? I mean, I think it's so organic. It fits in the space so well. I'm really looking forward to seeing it with the final plaster rendered on it. But what an ambitious build, and what an excellent execution. So Josh, thanks for sharing that with all of us. Thanks for allowing me to share that, and really appreciate just that wonderful example that we can share with people, because you've set a high bar there, my friend. So good job. So the Law Doc says, I do not see the need for the fiberglass between the skins of a masonry heater. Yeah, Law Doc. So I'm not going to tell you that there is a need for it. I do know that Josh here was working with someone who had a lot of experience with sort of traditional European masonry heater techniques, and Josh expressed to me a few times that he said, well, we're doing this, and I know that this is sort of outside of the realm of what you would normally do, but he's got his views from this other experience. And so they were definitely combining sort of some elements that some that were new to me. And yeah, I agree. I don't really see a need for it, but at the same time, I didn't hear the other person's explanation for why it was there, and I don't see any downside there. I think the biggest, you know, the cardboard, for example, I think the biggest reason to have something like that there is just so you don't accidentally pinch that gap and have contact somewhere where you didn't know you did, and then it ends up pushing that one brick out of whack and messing up your whole, you know, you might have a $200,000 soapstone skin on there if you're building a really fancy thing, and so that would be a disaster. So I think maybe it's just that little bit of material inside gives you that expansion joint, and you know that you didn't make contact. And perhaps his concept with the fiberglass is that it is inflammable, so rather than cardboard that's going to be sacrificial and burn away, they were just like, the fiberglass will stay in there and we won't have any, you know, new build smoke mess. I don't know. This is just a thought. I'm totally speculating, but I agree with you, Law Doc. I don't honestly know. I don't think it's necessary for sure. So, but anyways, a wonderful build. I mean, just an absolutely wonderful build. Oh, I'm sorry. I did have, I guess, a more finished picture. Look at that. So there it is with the render, with the landing, and this door. I'm going to go back so we can see. Okay, so this was like a closet space here. And I didn't realize that. He must have sent me that, and I put it in the folder and forgot about it. But there is the final rendered stove. So it is superb, isn't it, Belgian Gulch? I mean, you wouldn't know it was a stove. It's just gorgeous. So Luke asked if that's a piece Lador. I don't know, Luke. I'm not sure. It may be. This build, keep in mind, he's using like a Peterberg Sidewinder core plan. And he's just someone he's built one of my stoves before. He's purchased plans before. And so we just consulted as he was getting started. You know, he bounced some ideas off me and was kind enough to share the photos. So I don't know what door that is, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't think it's one of any of the normal ones that fit any of my stoves because it looks to be a different size. But I can't tell. Anyways, it's very nice. It's lovely. What a beautiful build, isn't it? And yeah, the way it fits in to the space. So here we are looking down. So this is, if you can imagine, you're walking on top of the bell right there on those stairs. So they are, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they are cast slabs. And just how cool, right? Like, what an incredible build. There's the chimney going up through the old home, and another picture from the front of it interfacing into the space. So in this way, like, he was really able to, he was able to build a very large masonry heater and really didn't take up any additional space in his home. So I think that's just so wonderful. So there we go. So that's the end of the pics, guys. So let me just get myself back to seeing y'all here. And there we go. So there you go, guys. there's the builds episode, or at least one of them. I've got more. We've got more we can do, but we'll wait a few weeks and let them build up, and we'll do another one of these. But but great builds, huh? Really cool to see, isn't it? It's so helpful to see how other people attack some of the details that come up. Yeah. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys enjoyed that. As you guys know, you can always go to my website, walkerstoves.com, check out plans for rocket mass heaters, plans for rocket stoves. I'm always happy to help you with your builds, and I love to see these things come together. So please send me your photos of your builds, send me your questions, send me your comments, and we're going to do this every Wednesday. 11 o'clock next Wednesday. We've been going for an hour, so we'll wrap this one up. But we'll be back next Wednesday for episode 30. Surprisingly enough. And man, what can I say? But as always, just thank you guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all your support, your guys' presence, your questions, your comments. It just means a lot to me. So lovely builds, everybody. Thank you for all your support, all the help on the forums. I just can't thank you enough. So John Mason asks, have I ever worked with Kuznetsov designs? And John, in a sense, we are all working with Kuznetsov, because I do believe that the free gas movement concept really stems from Kuznetsov work. So all of our bell designs, I think, are essentially following his theory of design. But I can't say that I've ever built anything that, like, he drew, like, here's his plan. But absolutely, he's a very, very, very important figure in all of these stoves, and the free gas movement is kind of the underlying theory that we use when building these bell masonry heaters like I do. So I'm probably one of his biggest fans. I'm a huge proponent. So great question. Hope that answered it for you. So all right, you guys. So that's enough for today. Hope you guys have an awesome week. Enjoy the fall weather. Enjoy your fires. David, good to see you. I forgot to say hi. I apologize. But nice to see all you guys. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to hit the outgoing video. And I'll see you guys next week for episode 30. Have an awesome week, you guys. See ya.